Welcome to the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast for 𝗪𝗔. We're brought to you, as always, by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. Find yours and shine on. With Charlie Roumeliotis, I am Pat Boyle. How you doing today, Charlie?
What is up? We were inside the locker room after practice today, and I was like, boy, I feel like a very old fart in here relative to all the young guys that have infused this locker room lately.
And if you feel old, how do you think I feel? Today was, for me, a dose of NHL reality. After talking about a rebuild and draft prospects that turn into Blackhawks prospects for a few years now and several months, today I stood in a room with 14 players under 23 or under years of age. And it was a stark contrast from the locker room I was in October and November. It's incredible. The future is becoming to be in more focus than what we have seen at the beginning of this season. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this group comes together. Again, it's not close to being a finished product. It's nowhere near a championship caliber team, but these are no longer prospects and pieces here, there, and everywhere. They're actually right in front of you.
Yeah, a lot of going into this season, obviously the Blackhawks were one of the oldest teams in the entire NHL with a lot of the veterans that they had on their roster. And it was kind of, we were providing prospects update, like what's Sam Rinzel doing in Minnesota and Oliver Moore, and what's Frank Nazar and Landon Slaggert, what are they doing down in Rockford? And they're all kind of finally here at the same time. We'll see how it all shakes out next year, who's going to need some time in the minors, whatnot. But it is, just tweeting out the line combinations and the pairings. It's just like, there are like two veterans on the team now where it's like, it's really something, and the youth movement is fully underway here in Chicago.
Yeah, and I even looked at it from the veterans' perspective. Like, imagine what it's like for Connor Murphy and Alec Martinez and Nick Foligno. Nick signed up for this knowing full well that, he was going to be the captain of a rebuild. Connor Murphy didn't sign up for this. This is the way the team has been, and now he's the elder statesman at just turned 32 last week. He's got to be looking around like, what is going on here? I mean, it's a dose of NHL reality, right? It just kind of, it hits you square in the face and you're like, wow, it's here. And, I was talking to Darren Pang about this, Charlie, and, it's a time where the organization kind of resets, because talking about Rinzel or Moore in Minnesota, or what Nazar had been doing in Michigan and what he was doing in Rockford, all these different things, it's now a reset. It doesn't matter where you were drafted, what the prospects ranking was of such and such, or internally, everybody's kind of reset. And it's from this point forward of how that player determines their role with this franchise. Just because you were Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year doesn't mean you're slotted automatically into a top four pairing. Just because you man the power play unit in Rockford doesn't mean you're going to be on the number one power. We're at the point now where the players are coming together, and they've come together in the last three drafts, most of them. And now, to me, it's almost a reset, and let's see where their hockey journey goes from this point.
Well, it's an interesting dynamic because you're finally able to see all the kids, quote unquote, in the locker room together. And even today, like Oliver Moore and Frank Nazar, they were vibing, they were poking fun at each other. And it's like, all the prospects that Chicago is assembling, especially on the back end, if you look at, 𝗪𝗏𝗏 and 𝗦𝗏𝗏 and Rinzel and Levshunov, you're like, okay, all of these guys are turning into some solid players. but there's not going to be room for all of them. So they're all kind of competing against each other too, not just for roles on the team, but like to prove that they can be a part of the next great Blackhawks team. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the dynamic shakes out over the next few years. But it's got to feel great if you're inside that Blackhawks locker room as one of the young guys, where it's funny that the veterans are typically off the ice first at practice because they need longer recovery time. So they know how much time, and it's more and more, we're like, oh, wow, there's still a lot of guys out there. And it's like, oh, because it's all the young guys, so they're using this experience as a bonding moment to build chemistry both on and off the ice.
So I met Oliver Moore and Sam Rinzel for the first time this afternoon. And, Moore said to me, it's going to be fun to see how we build something in this room. And, it's amazing that, they come in at age 20 and, they're talking about, growing a championship team. I was thoroughly impressed with the debuts of Rinzel and Oliver Moore. And as much as we've talked about them and we've looked at their clips and watched their games and how, their season came to an abrupt end on Thursday, boy, they looked like they fit in very nicely into the NHL. Again, it's one game, but it seemed somewhat seamless.
For sure. I thought Oliver Moore was very noticeable in the first period. I thought he was a little bit quiet in the second and thirds, but you saw the flashes of you're like, wow, that guy is very fast. And it's the consistent theme that the Blackhawks have been drafting over the last few years of guys that want to play with speed. But with Sam Rinzel specifically, I mean, he fit in so seamless. We were talking to him after practice on Saturday about his nerves going into his NHL debut. And he said, I'm confident in my abilities. I just want to show the confidence and be assertive when I play. And I was like, that's exactly how he played on Sunday. 7 shot attempts, 4 of them hit the net. I think feels like every single one of them was a high quality scoring chance. And he logged north of 20 minutes of ice time.
How about that? First NHL game logging north of 20.
And Pat, at no point did I ever see him like stick on his knees or whatever, like he was tired. Like it was like a ho-hum 20 minutes. And imagine the mental state that both of those guys were in too after such a heartbreaking loss on Thursday night. They were kind of mentally preparing for a potential deep run in the Frozen Four. They get eliminated in overtime. The way that it happened, they thought it was a tripping call, obviously, in overtime. They go down UMass goes down the other way and scores. And like within 24 hours, they're on a flight to Chicago and they had to think about how to process the loss while also being like, we're going to be in the lineup on Sunday.
It's crazy because you compare it to other sports. And again, we do a lot of comparison to football because it's the most popular sport and league in our country. But they have time to kind of get over each stage, the stage of grief, like your college career comes to an end. Then you ramp up to get drafted. And then you join your team and you go to OTAs and then you go to training camp and then you play your first game. NHL, we're going to draft you when you're 18. You're going to go play for 2 years in college. Then your college career is going to end unceremoniously on a Thursday, and you're in the lineup on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and it's turn the page and take off. It's like, and it was funny because one thing wasn't really processing. I was thinking about like how excited they must be to take on McKinnon and Makar tomorrow in their second NHL game. And they were like, hey, it was just cool to take on Utah and 𝗵𝗪. Like after, talking and seeing him on TV for so many years, they're like, wow, he wasn't as big as I thought he was. Like, they're still in that like I'm in the NHL pinch me moment, but they really don't have time to really soak up like how that player looks compared to how he's looked on their phone for the last 5 years. They've got to like gear up and get ready to go.
Right. It's not like they have a training camp to kind of slow wheel in it. They process the college is over and they have the summer to kind of digest it all, then shift the page. I mean, just in a 48-hour stretch, it was losing in heartbreaking fashion, sign the 𝗻𝗀𝗃, fly to Chicago at night, sign the 𝗻𝗀𝗃. They're in the lineup right away, and they looked great. And I don't know if maybe they were running on adrenaline. But with Sam Rinzel specifically, this is exactly the kind of scouting report that we had been getting from Minnesota, that it's like, this guy's going to step into the NHL right away and make an immediate impact. And we're seeing why. And it's interesting because when he got drafted in 2022, he was a third of the 3 first-round picks. It was 𝗵𝗀𝗃, it was Nazar, and then it was Sam Rinzel. And it was the Blackhawks had jumped up 13 spots from 39 to 26, acquired Petr Mrazek from Toronto, helped Toronto get Mrazek off the books, but it also helped the Blackhawks trade into the back half of the first round. And I remember when the Blackhawks drafted Sam Rinzel, a lot of the experts at the time were saying this was a reach by the Blackhawks. And I remember talking to Mike Donaghy right afterwards in the media scrum. He's like, this guy is very raw. He's a project, but when he hits his ceiling, he's going to be an impressive player. And I wonder, Pat, if we did a redraft of that draft right now, how many GMs wish they would have been a little bit more patient in, hey, if it's going to take 3 years to get him to the NHL, we'll be patient. And the Blackhawks had that luxury, but it might pay off in such a significant way that he might be a legitimate bona fide number 1 defenseman for the Blackhawks.
And to your point on that, I had 𝗵𝗃 𝗟𝗶𝗹 on the pregame show on Sunday, and we talked about Rinzel and Moore and what type of players they project to be for the Blackhawks. Take a listen to 𝗵𝗃 𝗟𝗶𝗹.
Well, Pat, first off, I project both of these players to be in the Hawks opening night lineup next season. In fact, I'll take it a step further with a bold prediction. You're not going to see Sam Rinzel play a single game in the AHL. Both of these guys, by the nature of which they signed, are not going to be eligible for the AHL playoffs this spring in Rockford. And so you could see Rinzel continue that all the way forward. This is a guy who's a dynamic player who can skate like the wind, and beyond that, the biggest strength that he has is that he never seems to be rattled. He is a top pair NHL defenseman, is what he projects out to be. I think he's a coin flip right now between who is the brightest star in the Hawks system, whether it's 𝗏𝗏 or Rinzel. He gives the Hawks tons of options moving forward. And when it comes to Oliver Moore, as Tony just mentioned, he's a guy that has speed to burn. He's someone that can certainly be a disruptor on the forecheck and bring that energy that the Hawks need. He could win a third-line role job out of camp next season as well. So someone that, when you think about the Hawks and where this has been trending all season long, I've been saying just be patient, because the biggest thing that the Hawks have to offer in their system is what's on the way, not necessarily what you can see tangibly in front of you, which is what getting these guys into a Hawks uniform today is an incredibly exciting day to be a Hawks fan.
So, he not only has both of them, Charlie, in next year's starting lineup on opening night, but in all likelihood, he has Sam Rinzel prediction that he'll never play a game in Rockford. That's pretty lofty expectations.
Yeah, and I think he's accurate in saying that, because he's so I don't know what he would need to prove in the AHL. Like we watched the game on Sunday where like this guy is already an NHL player, and so I don't doubt that. We did the mailbag episode last episode, and we were asked about specifically Oliver Moore and Ryan Green, how much time they might need in the minors. And for me, I thought half a year for Oliver Moore would probably be, maybe even a full year. I think actually I might have said a full year in the minors for Oliver Moore. And I was talking to someone the other day that said Rinzel is NHL ready right now. They thought Moore needs some time in the minors. And so I would honestly be surprised if Oliver Moore made the Blackhawks out of training camp next season. I don't think Frank is wrong when he says that, because I think he's getting that, like, he's very well sourced with the Blackhawks, with Blackhawks land. But I thought maybe the Blackhawks would play it like a Frank Nazar situation, where he gets a taste at the NHL level for the rest of this season, go into next summer, let him start the year in the minors, and let him tell you when he's ready to be a full-time NHL player. Because I'm not sure I would be crazy about the idea of Moore winning a training camp spot next season, but then he's maybe a month or two into the campaign and they're like, he needs some AHL time. Then they send him down, and then it's kind of this demoralizing thing. So we'll see how that all plays out. It's kind of a bridge they don't have to cross until next season. But I wholeheartedly agree with Frank when he says Sam Rinzel isn't going to see AHL time, because I don't think he needs it.
So it's incredible. We saw 6 first-round picks on the ice together on Sunday against Utah. Bedard, 𝗏𝗏, Nazar, Oliver Moore, Kevin Korchinski, and Sam Rinzel, all from the last 3 drafts, all played major roles on that day. Again, this is the future today. And again, I want to see these players push each other and have that internal competition that we saw in the Stanley Cup years of the 3 and 6 seasons, where certain players would push other players. And I asked that question to Anders Sorensen on Tuesday, and he said he's already seeing it. The speed level in practice has been ratcheted up. And that's kind of the approach, like Nick Foligno was saying, like he wants these guys to understand, like, where you're drafted gets you in the door. You know, now it's an opportunity. Now it's up to you what you're doing with that opportunity. So don't take any opportunities off. That practice may be the most you get looked at compared to a game where you're going to play 8 or 9 minutes. And don't take a shift off. Like, everything is being evaluated, and it's what you do from this point forward, even to the guys that have been the 𝗏𝗏s and the 𝗏𝗏𝘅s and the 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏s and Slaggerts that have been here most of the season. I think now those guys are going to be pushed, because every single position on the depth chart has been influenced with young talent.
Yeah, and even after this year's draft, there's going to be more talent that comes into the pipeline. And if you're a player that was even drafted in the first round, you're still going to be looking over your shoulder and saying, there's somebody else coming for my job if I don't live up to my standards. And so for sure, I think that the players shouldn't get complacent, nor do I think will they. And the reason I don't think they will is because Connor Bedard is kind of setting the tone inside that locker room among the young players. And if he's the guy out there always participating in an optional morning skate, always almost the first guy on the ice, the last one off the ice, you better be out there with him, because he that's the work that he puts in to elevate his game and to want to hold himself to that kind of standard. And I think it's going to be infectious inside that locker room. Like, boy, I came off the ice 20 minutes ago and Connor's still out there shooting pucks. Like, it makes them want to stay out there more. And we've kind of seen that, because there's like this waiting period inside the locker room where the veterans come off, and then we're waiting for like another 10 to 15 minutes. And you're like, oh yeah, the young guys, they're still out there, because it's almost like they're building that camaraderie, but they also want to start building that chemistry on the ice too.
And we're going to see some guys go back down to Rockford and help them out in their playoffs. We'll likely see Colton Dock head down. You'll probably see Artem Levshinov and who else?
I think Del Mastro. Yeah, Del Mastro, I think, was a paper transaction too.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see when they determine it's the right time to reinsert them into the Rockford culture and help them on their run. Have you heard any whispers or any game plans of kind of what they're thinking big picture?
Not yet. And I think because Rockford is pretty comfortably in a playoff spot, it looks like, I don't think there's really any urgency to get them down there right away. But it is going to be interesting, because poor Rockford started the year with one team, and now they're pretty much in the NHL right now. And Mark Eaton and his staff have had to kind of tread water with all these different pieces that weren't on the roster like a couple months ago. And there's going to be like this influx of talent that comes down there for the stretch run and for the playoffs. And so we'll see how that plays out. I think it would be valuable experience for Rockford to make a deep playoff run, to get those guys playing some meaningful playoff games. And so we'll have to see how all that shakes out.
We're not going to get to see Ryan Green for a while. And look, NCAA, they got to get their act together here. Can I go off on a little bit of
I want to hear
hockey tournament situation here with the NCAA? So Boston University is going to play Penn State on April 10th. They had their last game on the 30th. So there's going to be, 10 or 11 days in between games. Denver will play Western Michigan also on April 10th. The title game is April 12th. Why such and I understand that the Final Four is going to take place this upcoming weekend. There is plenty of time to maneuver around those games and that schedule. You could play them on the off days. You know what I mean? You could play it Thursday and Sunday. I don't understand. First of all, now look, full disclosure, I've got a daughter at Penn State. I probably am going to have a son that's a freshman there next year. So a lot of my finances go to that school, but no way should Penn State, a 12 seed, had the first round advantage and second round advantage of playing in their own backyard in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I mean, if I'm a consultant to the NCAA and their hockey tournament situation, I would continue it with the 14 teams, but it's 14, right?
Yeah.
14. I would give the higher seeds would play in their own barn in the opening round. And then I would have an extra day or two for the round of 14 is whittled down to
or actually it's 16.
16.
Yeah.
16, the top 8 seeds play in their own barn. Then in the round of 8, it's moved to an NHL venue where you stagger the 4 games of the final 8. And then you bridge the gap. You don't have 2 weeks off between the round of 8 and the final 4. And you work around the men's tournament and try to find a sweet spot or a hole in their schedule, which, again, shouldn't be difficult when they're playing Saturday and Monday night. You should be able to find something Thursday, Friday, and on Sunday. So that's my. But I just don't think I don't think the first and second round games are well attended in the venues they pick to begin with, and I think you should give the top 8 seeds some sort of benefit for what they did in the regular season by giving them a home game. And then you move to neutral sites the rest of the way.
Yeah, I like that idea. And it kind of is a double-edged sword of wanting to reward the higher seeds. And then also the 2 weeks, the 2-week break. It's like when the Frozen Four starts, they're basically playing a game 7 after a 2-week break. It's a little bizarre. I remember when it was in Chicago, I think it was in 2017. I mean, atmosphere was incredible. Like the Frozen Four draws, but it's getting there. That's a little bit of the issue. And I'm totally with you that it feels like there should be some sort of benefit to the teams that were the best in the regular season all year.
And not looking, but the Blackhawks schedule, their final game is April,
I think 15th.
15th. So if it goes the distance for BU, the earliest he would be able to play is the 14th and the 15th. So he'd only get the last 2 games of the season in a perfect world. So again, that's if a BU defeats Penn State and gets to the title game. And it looks like 𝗙cie 𝗵𝗶𝗹 is going to join BU next year. He went into the transfer portal after North Dakota changed coaches. And it looks like I don't think he'll have Ryan Green as a teammate, certainly, but we'll see the factory that is BU work with another Blackhawk prospect.
Yeah, it was. There were a lot of names in the transfer portal yesterday, and so there were a lot of moving pieces, and all of this is way above my head because I kind of forget that they can like do that in college hockey now too, and it's interesting. The year that 𝗏𝗏 had too, like he was one of their top guys. So it's not like he was kind of sheltered and didn't have a great year and he's kind of looking for a change of scenery. I'm not sure if it was the coaching change that sparked it or if it was, Boston paid up. Like I have no idea what exactly was behind the decision. But I know that 𝗏𝗏 had a terrific season at North Dakota and curious to see how his game transferred over to professional as well, because he's like the one of the few true centers that the Blackhawks have in the pipeline, him and Ryan Green. So I'm interested to see, like a lot of guys, Nazar, Oliver Moore, they're kind of a hybrid of center and wing. So we'll see when 𝗏𝗏 does get to the pros, hopefully after the end of next season, how he performs in the pros.
So what did you think of the Slaggert, Oliver Moore, Lukas Reichel line that we saw on Tuesday?
Might be one of the fastest and youngest lines in the NHL. A lot of speed. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate all that together because they're all playing the three of them together for the first time all year, obviously with Oliver Moore here, but it's a very young and inexperienced line. So you got Reichel as the veteran of the line. So we'll see how it works out. It can either go it's probably going to go one of two ways, very well or very poorly, right? I mean, I'm not sure if it's going to go, there's going to be like an in-between just because you're going to see the raw talent and they're just going to kind of feed off of playing each other, or it's going to be like there's too much inexperience in that line, might have to change it up. But quite frankly, when I saw it in practice today, I was like, this line can absolutely fly. And hopefully we see that on Wednesday against Colorado.
Frankie Nazar, we're basically seeing a breakaway per game from him. Part of Tuesday's practice, which was a little on the longer side, was working on breakaways. I think that's beneficial not only for the netminders, but for the forwards. You've got all the speed on display, and I didn't mind that they did it at the end of practice when the ice wasn't great because that's going to be a similar situation if we get to a shootout or late in periods where they get bad ice. So I was very happy to see that being worked on.
Frank Nazar has been awesome. And if he adds that scoring touch to his game, I mean, he's going to become a really nice all-around player for the Blackhawks that can play in all situations. I was joking around in the post-game show the other day saying like the second the season ends, Frank Nazar is going to go home, probably take a couple weeks off, and then the second he returns to the ice, he's probably immediately going to be working on breakaways all summer, because if he can bury those chances, think about how many games that he could impact if he
could at least have 8 more goals, and I'm not being...
Oh yeah, that's not an exaggeration.
No.
Yeah, no, it's legit, and more than half of those they would have come at a time in the game where it could have swung the pendulum the other way. And so I don't really have a doubt in my mind that he will start to bury those over time. The fact that he's getting those chances has got to be an encouraging sign for Chicago, because that breakaway speed is no joke.
So one of the toughest teams in the National Hockey League comes to the United Center on Wednesday night. It's going to be an 8:52 puck drop. So it's the late game, obviously, on TNT. And we'll see 𝗦𝗏cie and Rinzel together to start the game, at least. Kaiser and Levshunov, 𝗏𝗏𝗏 and Murphy. So only Murphy is really the elder statesman. The one thing I think, too, that we need to watch is the response and the physicality part of it. Patty Maroon has taken a lot on his shoulders this season. Nick Foligno has done that. Connor Murphy has done that. As you pull, a guy like Patty Maroon out of the equation, when something happens like a blatant slash on Alex 𝗦𝗏𝗏, and that goes, on no response to it, like somebody on this team from the young group is going to have to emerge to be the person that's going to police some of this, because one thing is bringing 14, 15 guys, but like they maybe haven't had that. Obviously, they haven't had that in their last role at their, in college or necessarily in the minors. And in the NHL, you don't want teams realizing that they can take liberties with some of your players.
Yeah, for sure. I was actually talking to Alex about that today after practice, because it looked, when I saw that happen, I was like, it looked very scary.
That was a knee injury.
Yeah, I mean, that was like, oh boy, this might be long-term injury. And then he pops up on the bench like a few minutes later. I was like, holy cow, like huge. Blackhawks dodged a bullet there. And, 𝗦𝗏𝗏 was saying, he's like, I didn't, in the moment, I didn't think it was as bad. But then I saw the replay and I was like, it's a two-hand slash to my knee. How is that not a penalty? And so fortunately for Alex that he was okay and was able to return. But yeah, I agree that they do have some players in the pipeline. Like I know Sam 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is kind of like an Andrew Shaw type bite but again, he's a smaller guy, so he's not really like the Pat Maroon enforcer. Marcel 𝗏𝗏𝗏 is the guy. Like I think, unfortunately for him, we just found out he's going to be out for a few weeks with an injury. But like he's the guy that I don't think the Hawks are going to go out of their way to draft. But I think as the pieces fill into the roster, like the young guys, it's going to be potential additions that the Blackhawks make via free agency, where we're like, okay, we need some of these guys to come in here and be the protector for our young players.
They signed Tage Harding, the 6'6", 235-pound D-man, third round pick in 2021. So he'll be heading to Rockford, right?
Yep, on an amateur tryout, signed a 2-year entry-level contract. He is a massive dude, massive defenseman. So adding more size on the back end for the Blackhawks organizational pipeline. But this is something we were expecting to come down the pipeline, and Rockford gets a little bit of reinforcements down there for their stretch run.
One thing I want to touch on before we exit the goaltending, there's been a slip in production. Some of that is goalie related, and some of that is the players in front of said goalies. For Spencer Knight, he's allowed 4 or more goals in 4 of his last 5 starts. Over those 5 starts, an 𝗏𝗏𝗋𝗔 save percentage. That conversely to his first 4 starts, where he allowed 3 or fewer goals and had a 𝗏𝗏𝗋𝗆 save percentage. So huge, unbelievable Vezina-like numbers there out of the gates, and then below average numbers on the back end. And Soderblom, in 9 appearances since the Four Nations break, he has got a save percentage of 𝗏𝗏𝗋₻. So what Charlie, do you make of the goaltending situation that we've seen? And again, this also coincides with an influx of young D-men now playing in front of these guys.
Right. In the Utah game, I actually didn't think Arvid Soderblom was bad. Like there were a lot of deflection goals. There were just nothing that he could have done. In the game prior, I didn't like Spencer Knight's performance. I think that there were probably a few goals that he would have liked back. But my concern level is honestly pretty low for the goaltending, just because I think over time, as the Blackhawks become more structured and the young players start to play within the structure of getting all on the same page and they're not trying to work out the kinks, the goaltending is going to come. And my concern level for Spencer Knight is pretty low too, because I know what his upside is, and there's going to be time for him to kind of like just get acclimated to Chicago. I was actually speaking to Spencer the other day, and it looked like he was breaking in some new pads, and he was talking about his glove too. Like he's like, I have to get all my gloves in sync. And I was like, what do you mean gloves like in sync? He's like, I change my glove, or his glove and his blocker every period. So he has 3 different sets for a glove and a blocker for the first, for the second, and the third, because he's like, it gets sweaty and wet. And so like, I just want to change it out. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Goaltenders are certainly weird. But I thought that was a pretty interesting tidbit. But yeah, my concern level for the goaltending is honestly pretty low, because I think over time, as the Blackhawks get more structured with the younger players and over the years, it's going to be less. Wow, there were 10 cross ice passes today, or there were 10 rush chances in this game. Like, the quality of chances are probably going to diminish over time.
I also heard recently that 𝗵𝗻𝗄 is on one of his best runs of the season and of his pro career. And when I talk about competition within a franchise, that can work from the big club to the AHL club. You know, it's probably not coincidence that since Spencer Knight gets acquired at the trade deadline in the Seth Jones deal, that, you know, 𝗵𝗄 heightens his awareness of his situation, and maybe he raises his game to the next level. So again, these are moving parts at all times. And that's the thing I think I'm going to really like to see here from this point forward, is the competitive level being ratcheted up. Because over the last few years, there was not much accountability. The expectations were so low. There weren't prospects in the minors ready to take jobs and be called up. And so underperforming, not performing to your expectations, bad play, call it what you want, it was tolerated because they didn't really have any other options. Now this franchise has options, and if you don't perform and you don't meet expectations, there's going to be somebody there to take your spot.
Right. Like, even last year, what was it? There were 9 guys on injured reserve, and there was more money tied up to IR than there was on the active roster. And so the Hawks literally had no choice last year than to just be like, well, we got to play these guys because we don't have bodies. And so, and even the thing too, Pat, is with just the competition, not just elevating everyone else's game, but you also want the prospects to develop into potential tradable assets if they're not going to be part of the long-term picture of the Blackhawks, because there's just mathematically, there's only 6 spots for the top 6. So who are going to be your top 6 on the next competitive Blackhawks team? Who's going to be in the third line checking role? Like, there's only so many roles to go to be had. And so when some of the players down in Rockford or elsewhere in the pipeline, in college or in juniors, if they're continuing to elevate their game and produce, it's like they become more valuable as trade chips as well to potentially land a big fish for the Blackhawks. So it's a win-win for everyone when everyone is pushing each other.
Anything else before we exit?
I got nothing else. We got our last 8:52 puck drop on Wednesday of the season, and then, Pat, the final 7 games are all 6 o'clock or earlier. So that is beautiful.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yes.
Good to know.
I'll take that trade-off.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for the latest installment. Oh, we didn't mention OV on Friday. By the way, Alex Ovechkin, 5 away from breaking Gretzky. And what is Washington? They have got 1 game before our game, right?
I think they have a game tonight and a game tomorrow. So a game Tuesday and Wednesday. So it's like very possible.
So here we go. Like, score 2 today. Maybe at least 1 or 2 tomorrow.
He had a hat trick in the United Center game to hit 800. At what point does NHL commissioner?
This game's in Washington.
Yes. At what point do NHL commissioner Gary Bettman and Wayne Gretzky start following? Is it 5? So it's got to be now.
5.
So I'm guessing they're going to be in attendance tonight.
I would believe he would be in attendance tonight.
I think 5 is the goal too.
All right, so that should be, must listen to on WGN radio and must see television on CHSN Friday. So, look, if he's 2 or 3 away, like it's gonna be must see TV.
Do you think if Washington got to a point where he's tied for the record and there's an empty net situation, do you think he's out there for it?
Yeah.
I think so too.
I don't.
It would
I
be
don't
a buzzkill.
I don't think you try to plan how the record breaker comes.
Yeah.
Why break from precedent? I mean, he's been out there.
That's true.
It was funny the other night when he scored. I guess it was Sunday. It looked like he had his second of the game, and I can't remember the forward that redirected the puck in, but it almost like he sheepishly went, to the celebration, and it kind of almost felt bad that he because I don't know if it was if the shot was going to go, in the net or not, or if it needed the redirection. I think it needed the redirection, but it was one of those things where I'm like, God, now you've got players on the ice. Like, am I taking away some goals from my teammate? How am I affecting this hallowed
record chase
that's going to be broken.
The real nightmare, Pat, is if Ovechkin scores a goal and everyone's showering the ice and it gets overturned by an offside. God help us if that happens. Because remember, something happened similarly on a much smaller scale. Nathan MacKinnon getting 1,000 points against the Blackhawks, the bench showers, and it's like, oh, sorry, got overturned. Boy, I hope that does not happen.
All right, so and on that note, we've had a bad run the last few weeks on goalie interference calls. Like we are in the midst of a bad run with the playoffs looming. But if I do know Gary Bettman, I think he is saying, look, easy with the quick whistles or the emphatic call on the ice. Let's let things play out in the situation room. And situation room, if you have a situation to let Alex Ovechkin make history, you better damn well let it happen.
Yes, and if you're the opposing team and it does not matter in the standings and you think it might be goalie interference, do not challenge it because we don't want a second celebration to have to overcome it.
You're throwing out all the possibilities.
I'm thinking about every possible scenario.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, you wouldn't want to be known as that team.
Yeah, you want to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna challenge this.
Could you Blackhawks vying for the final spot, and they're challenging an OV record breaker on Friday night?
Oh my gosh, yeah, that we'll see how that transpires. But glad we got the nightmare scenarios out of our chest.
All right, so we did have something left on the table. That's going to do it for the Breakaway Podcast for CHSM. For Charlie, I'm Pat. Thanks for watching, listening. We'll catch you next time.